Hi, and welcome to Comedy Recapped. Today we're going to be exploring 1984's Fletch, starring Chevy Chase. The movie begins with a homeless-looking man, Fletch, walking along the beach. He lets us know that he's an investigative reporter for the local paper, and he's on the search for a local junkie. As he sits and talks to Sam, he questions when the shipment will be coming in, and he tells him that it'll be whenever it comes in. From the sidelines, someone can be seen watching him from their car. As Fletch leaves the little stand, he heads over to the man leaning up against the pier. The man's name is Creasy, and he's trying to figure out when Sam will have some stuff for him. After Creasy decides to get some sleep, Fletch leaves him there and walks around the pier. Before he comes out the other side, another man stops him to tell him that they have to talk, and the man offers him $1,000 to come to his house and listen to a proposition. No matter what he decides, he'll get to keep the $1,000. When Fletch goes back to the man's house, he finds out that the man actually wants him to murder him. His name is Alan Stanley, and he explains that he is already supposed to die a slow death because he has bone cancer, and he explains that his company has a big life insurance policy on him, so it has to look like something other than suicide. The man already has Fletch's escape plan thought out, and he assures him $50,000 to do the deed. As the man goes through the details and tells Fletch about the safe and gun, Fletch starts to piece the missing links together. After the man explains that there will be a ticket waiting for him at the local airport, Fletch tries to make sure that all of the loopholes are already figured out. After Fletch finally agrees to kill the man, he goes to his reporting office to talk to a helpful female friend named Larry. He asks her to look up as much information as possible about the man he's supposed to kill. He also has the pleasure of dealing with Frank, one of his editors, pestering him about finishing his story for the paper. Fletch goes to see what information Larry has pulled up on the man, and he finds out that the man is big money. He finds out that the address of the man's doctor and heads over to investigate. Once there, Fletch tries to act as though he is part of the same club as the doctor and Alan. But the more they talk, the deeper Fletch digs himself into a hole. After a very thorough examination, Fletch doesn't really find anything out, so he goes to the record room in search of Alan's file. While there, he somehow gets pulled into an autopsy, which results in him holding some spare organs while the doctor continues to cut up a body. Soon, Fletch passes out. When he comes to, he's drinking coffee in the records room, and he realizes that he needs to get out of there as soon as he can before he is caught. He finds out which file belongs to Alan and snags it. He then asks the nurse to verify if Alan really is sick with cancer. She explains that according to the record, he does not have cancer. Later, Fletch heads to the tennis court to find Alan's wife, Gail. Once there, he tries to question her about Alan, but she leads to the idea that he is just trying to hit on her. After striking out there, Fletch heads over to see a business partner of Alan's, and he finds out that Alan isn't nearly as powerful and rich as he acts in front of other people. Before he leaves, Fletch asks for the number of Alan's real estate manager. When Fletch goes home, he notices that a lawyer is waiting for him in the front, so he decides to go through the back entrance. As Fletch climbs the fire escape, he finds out that his ex-wife's lawyer is already waiting for him on the fire escape to discuss his neglect in paying alimony. When Fletch lets the lawyer in, his lawyer assures him that he has no qualms with Fletch, but the law is the law. He informs Fletch that he owes almost $1,000 in alimony, and Fletch pulls out the cash to get him off of his back. Once he's settled in at home, Fletch grabs a beer and relaxes in bed for a bit. As he starts to pass out, he dreams that he is part of the Lakers game with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Later, Fletch heads back to the beach, and he notices that the police have shown up to shake down some of the residents of the beach. When they notice that the police are bearing on a defenseless man, he goes to defend him, but the police just take the man in the back of their squad car instead. Fletch manages to break the back of their windshield, but the police don't stop to do anything about it. Later, Fletch goes to see his editor, and he tries to buy more time. After confirming some suspicions of police being involved, Fletch manages to talk his editor into getting him to Utah to find out what Alan has been up to. Once he lands, he heads to the real estate agent's office where he finds paperwork that proves the sale of the deed. But when Fletch gets ready to leave, the watchdog leaps straight through the window and chases him back to his car. After Fletch gets back to his apartment, he is grabbed by two detectives who end up planting drugs in his apartment. When they bring him into the station, they take Fletch to see the chief of police, and we find out that the chief isn't too happy about the story Fletch is planning on printing. He tells Fletch that he has undercover cops on the beach that he might get killed if he prints his story. Fletch doesn't back down though. They simply lock Fletch up, and he soon realizes that the chief of police might just kill him and plant a knife on him to make it look like self-defense. When Fletch plays along and gets out, he goes back to his editor to explain how he almost came to die in that prison cell. His editor doesn't believe him, and he tells Fletch to get a real story he can print. After doing a little bit of detective work, he goes to check on Gail at the tennis club, and he gets them lunch. He charges it all to the name of Underhill, and the bill catches the attention of Mr. Underhill. While Fletch asks Gail questions about Alan and his family, a knock comes from the door, and we find out that Mr. Underhill is at the door now. When Gail finds out that Fletch has been lying, she gives him a change of clothes, and he comes clean about who he is. When Fletch tells Gail that Alan hired him to kill him, he tells her about all the other lies that Alan has told, and Gail finally realizes that Alan is involved with a lot of shady things. Fletch goes back to the streets, and he starts doing some of his usual investigative work on Alan, and he finds that Alan retrieves a case from the chief of police in a shady deal. When Fletch eventually goes home, he notices that police are waiting for him in the parking garage, and he takes off in a hurry. Soon he comes to a boy in a convertible, and he hops in with him to take it for a spin. As the chase continues, Fletch ends up losing multiple patrols as he continues to drive recklessly across town. Eventually, Fletch makes it to an open restaurant door that leads to a veteran's dinner. As Fletch pretends to be a server, he eventually ends up playing as a veteran. After pulling the spotlight to himself, he makes up a story about the guest of honor and actually gets the crowd to interfere with the police as he makes his escape out the side door. Later on, Fletch goes to the airport, and he ends up taking a Pan Am flight. When he tries to call his editor, he explains that he is heading to Utah to get the story, and the editor only gives him until the evening to get a story on his desk. Once Fletch lands, he hops into a car and drives to the location. When no one answers, Fletch lets himself in, and he sees that the house is mainly empty, minus a few rotten items in the fridge. As he continues to investigate the house, he ends up running into a man with a gun. The man claims to work for the landlord that told him to watch the place. When Fletch says that he's supposed to meet up with the lady of the house, the man tells him that she moved out that morning. He is very direct with his line of questioning, and he tells Fletch that he's going to call the police. Fletch thinks fast and slips by the man. Once he gets to the car, he takes off, but not before the man takes out the back windshield. When Fletch gets back to his hotel that evening, he calls Larry and asks her for help once more. The next day, Fletch goes to a local farm to meet with Alan's parents. As he gets a little more friendly with the farmer, he tries to question him about his son, Alan. When Fletch starts to ask questions about Alan, he starts to realize that Alan has been lying to his parents about who his life really is. When Alan's mother brings a picture of the two of them, Fletch takes the picture, and he goes back to Gail to prove to her that Alan is lying about a lot more than she thought. Gail immediately wants to call someone to tell them, but Fletch asks for more time. He asks her to stay away from the house the next day, and he takes her to her room. The next day, Fletch shows up on the beach in a disguise, and he goes to talk to the man that the police tried to beat up earlier. After Fletch puts some pressure on the guy, he opens up to Fletch and tells him pretty much everything he wants to know. When Fletch goes to the office, he brings two witnesses to prove that he was right about the chief of police. That night, Fletch makes his way onto Alan's property, and he spots the office that he is supposed to kill Alan in. The safe is open, and cases are sitting there waiting for him. As Fletch looks around some more, he finds that the gun isn't where it should be. When he finds Alan sitting on the second-story banister, he sees that he has a gun on him. Fletch pulls out some papers he wants Alan to sign, and he explains who he really is this time. All of a sudden, Gail shows up to hear the truth of everything, and Alan can't lie about any of it anymore. He gives Fletch credit where credit is due, But soon the chief of police shows up, and he shoots Alan down since he doesn't trust him to handle the situation. When the chief turns towards Fletch, Fletch fights back, and with the help of Gale, they manage to knock out the chief. The next day, Gale and Fletch go to the newspaper office to start packing up for vacation. After hearing about the case, we find out that the chief faces 20 years of jail time. Meanwhile, Fletch and Gale spend a peaceful time on the beach as new lovers. And we find out that he charges the entire trip to Mr. Underhill's American Express card. That wraps up this recap. Chevy Chase is a staple when it comes to 80s films, and Fletch is no exception. We hope you've enjoyed watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single video.